So as a real estate broker myself, I'm often asked about AB 1482. So if you're curious about that, you want to learn more about the Tenant Protection Act here in California, you've come to the right video. We're going to be talking about the basics of it, some of the exceptions, and then also how to calculate the CPI, what is just cause. We'll talk a little bit about the substantial remodel clause and what that exactly means and how you can evict or increase the rents. My name is Joshua Farris. I'm a real estate broker here on the Central Coast, and hopefully this video will bring you some valuable information. If it does, like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get started. We're talking about the basics of AB 1482 and what you need to know as a real estate investor. So let's go ahead and get started with an important component here of the bill. And pulling this up here, we can see some of the basics and the gist overall of this law. This bill would, until January 1st of 2030, prohibit an owner of residential real property from, over the course of any 12-month period, increasing the gross rental rate for a dwelling or unit more than 5% plus the percentage change in the cost of living as defined, or 10%, whichever is lower, of the lowest gross rental rate charged for the immediately preceding 12 months, subject to specified conditions. So in other words, the basics of this law have to do with a rental cap here in California and also what constitutes just cause evictions. So basically, like it discusses, over a 12-month period, you can't raise the rents on a tenant more than 10% or 5% plus the CPI. Also, it discusses the just cause and some of the exemptions to the law, and we'll get into that in a short minute. But first, let's go ahead and talk about how to calculate the CPI, because that's an important component of this bill. So the California Apartment Association website here has a handy calculator, the regional CPI calculator, and I am a member here of this organization. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you out with this. But you can see here the CPI increase after August 1st of 2023 here for San Luis Obispo County is 4.2%. So total 9.2% total allowable increase according to AB 1482. All right, so for example, let's say you own a duplex here on the Central Coast, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. You're renting out each unit for $2,500. For every 12 months, you can increase the rent by $230. So you can increase the rent from $2,500 to $2,730. So it just gives you a real world example there of how much you can increase the rents per 12 months. And remember that you cannot increase more than 2 times over a 12-month period. All right, so now that we've talked about how to calculate the CPI, let's go ahead and talk about some exemptions. Exemptions from AB 1482. Let's go ahead and take a look at those. Transient and hotel occupancy is defined in subdivision B of section 1940. Housing accommodations for a nonprofit hospital, religious facility, extended care, etc. Dormitories owned and operated by an institution of higher education or a kindergarten grades 1 through 12. Housing accommodations in which the tenant shares a bathroom or kitchen facilities with the owner. They maintain it as their principal residence at the residential real property. Single-family owner-occupied residences, a duplex in which the owner occupied one of the units as the owner's primary place of residence at the beginning of the tenancy, so long as the owner continues occupancy. Housing that has been issued a certificate of occupancy within the previous 15 years, and residential real property that is alienable separate from the title to any other dwelling unit, provided that both of the following apply. And you can read there. And it's important to make note that the tenants have to be provided, if there is an exemption, if the property is an exempted property, tenants have to be provided with written notice that the residential property is exempt. And it's important to make note that buildings built within the last 15 years are exempt to this law. So if you're buying, let's say, a newer apartment building, then you're going to be exempt from 1482. So just something to keep in mind here for some of the exemptions for this law. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about just cause. We'll talk about at fault and we'll talk about no fault. And these are important distinctions here. So let's go ahead and take a look at both of those. Here you can see at fault evictions include non-payment of rent, breach of a material term of the lease, criminal activity, refusal to allow lawful entry, refusal to execute a new lease containing similar terms. And no fault evictions include something like the owner is moving in, intent to demolish or substantially remodel the unit. We'll talk about here in a moment. Withdrawal of the unit from the rental market, or the owner complying with a government order or local law that requires the tenant to leave. So one of the discussions that I oftentimes have with investors has to do with what is a substantial remodel, right? So typically what I say is if it's a remodel that requires the tenant to be gone for more than 30 days, they cannot live in the property while the remodel is happening. A remodel does not include, minor cosmetic updating, but significant remodels that make it such that the tenant cannot live in the unit safely during the remodel process. So this is one way as an investor that you can evict justly with a just cause some of your tenants or a tenant, right? If you're getting in there and you're doing this substantial remodel. But you want to be careful that you know what that means. So let's go ahead and pull up the term here, the definition as discussed in the law. Intent to demolish or substantially remodel the residential real property. For purposes of this subparagraph, substantial remodel means the replacement or substantial modification of any structural, electrical, plumbing, or mechanical system that requires a permit from a government agency or the abatement of hazardous materials, including lead-based paint, mold, or asbestos, in accordance with applicable federal, state, and local laws that cannot be reasonably accomplished in a safe manner with the tenant in place, and that requires the tenant to vacate the residential real property for at least 30 days. Cosmetic improvements alone, including painting, decorating, and minor repairs or other work that can be performed safely without having the residential real property vacated, do not qualify as substantial rehabilitation. All right, so there you have it, AB 1482, California Tenant Protection Act. We talked about the basics, how to calculate CPI, what constitutes a substantial remodel, and also talked about just cause. Our goal here is to bring you value as a real estate investor so that you can accomplish and achieve your real estate goals and build wealth for yourself and your family and build a lasting legacy. If you found this information helpful, we appreciate a like and a subscribe. And until next time, take care. Talk to you soon.